So I thought I'd give you an overview of the session. So I think there are really three sort of areas that I want to share with you. So one is I want to give you some information, just some straightforward information about what is mindfulness and how and what might it offer somebody who's had or who's in the middle of experiencing ovarian cancer and treatment. And then I want to also give you a few very brief practices to take away. So when I say very brief, these can be as brief as a couple of seconds or, just a very short period of time. There are longer practices which you can access online, and I can give you some information, but I will give you some very simple ones, 3 that you can go away with, that you can use in a number of different ways. And then I want to offer you just a few ideas and things to reflect on. So I've got a nice poem for you. But I've got a number of ideas that I shall just drop in, and you may remember some, you may forget some, but just see how those land with you. And as I said before, if you like the sound of them, then that's great. Have a go and sort of reflect and experiment. And if you don't, fine, just ignore. Okay, so let's just come to a very short practice that will perhaps set us up for this session. And as I guide you in any of these practices, I will invite you to close your eyes if you want to, keep them open if you want to. You can do these practices lying down, you can do them sitting. Right? So there's lots and lots of options, and the best way of doing them is to just do them in a way that suits you. So if it's okay for you, let's just briefly come to a sense of your feet on the floor. So those of you, you're probably sitting looking at the screen. So if you'd like to just experience this practice, if it feels okay for you. So just coming to, I'm going to close my eyes, but just coming to a sense of your feet on the floor. So all you're going to do is just to place your attention into the soles of your feet. Perhaps feeling into your shoes, the contact with shoes, and a sense of the solid of the floor beneath your feet. You're really just coming into a sense of the body sitting here. And those of you perhaps lying down, then maybe the body lying down, contact of the back with the bed or the couch, whatever you're lying on. And just taking a moment or two to notice how that is, just the body sitting, the body lying. And now if you'd like to, I'd like to invite you to reflect now on your intention for coming onto this session, for connecting with this session, your intention, whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it a bit later when on a recorded viewing of it. So just connecting perhaps with some thoughts about, well, why did I decide I wanted to come and watch this session, be part of this session? What was I hoping for? What was my goal, if you like? And there may be something specific that comes up for you, or it may be that you're just, you just thought you'd have a go. You enjoyed the last few or whatever, and you just thought, well, have a go at that one. It sounds quite interesting. So now I'd like to invite you to going to do a little kind of guided imagery exercise, which again you can follow if you'd like to, but you don't need to if it doesn't sound something you'd like to do. But as you sit here, perhaps imagining that you're sitting beside a lake or beside a river, perhaps, but beside a body of water. You're sitting quite safely on the bank. You've got one of those nice camping chairs, perhaps, or you're sitting on a nice firm rock or stone or something that just keeps you quite safe. But in front of you, you can see the water, and the water's very clear. You can see all the way down to the bottom of the river or the stream, or perhaps all the way down to the bottom of the lake. And then what I'd like you to do is to imagine, if you'd like to, that you could pick up a little pebble that's just beside your seat, and you could just gently toss it into the water. And I want you to imagine that this little pebble is going to travel down through the water incredibly slowly, much more slowly than it actually would. It's almost like weightless. And you can watch it as it goes all the way down. So as you watch your little pebble moving down gently through this clear water, just inviting you to ask yourself a question which you could almost drop into yourself, almost drop into the insides of you. What is my intention for this session? And just watching that little pebble go down as you let the question just drop into you. What is my intention for this session? And then as the little pebble goes a little bit further, you might sort of deepen the question and actually ask yourself, well, what is it that really matters to me? That this session, this mindfulness taster session might support? What is it that really matters to me? That mindfulness might support, that this session might support? And just notice as you drop that question in, as you watch the pebble move down through the water. Just notice perhaps some words or some images, some faces, some thoughts or ideas. And perhaps just breathing with them, not worrying too much if you've got an answer or if lots of words come or if no words come at all. I often find that the deepest intentions are often not particularly full of words. They're almost like a feeling in the body, a felt sense. Sort of something that rings true. Even if we'd be hard pushed to explain it. And now as the pebble moves down through the water, where it's coming towards the bottom of the lake or the bottom of the river, coming to rest, perhaps on a sandy area or perhaps to join some other stones down at the bottom. And then when you're ready, just gently moving the body so that you come back into a sense of your feet on the floor, body on the chair. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. Okay. And just inviting you to just reflect a little bit on that intention. Just to notice what that experience was like for you. If we were in the same room together or even on a Zoom screen, all of us together, we could just have a little conversation about what you got in touch with. Certainly I do that practice quite often. I find it very helpful, actually. I've had my granddaughter staying with me overnight, which is a great pleasure. And I just think to myself, if I asked her what really mattered to her, she would come up with a very different answer to mine. You know, if I asked myself that question in my 20s or 30s, it would be very different to the answers or the connections that I would make now. So it's a good question, isn't it? That it's a good question, and it's one that we can connect with, that actually really helps us stay true to spending time in a way that matters, because it's so easy to lose time. It's so easy to, I don't know, do all sorts of things that waste time. Yeah. So setting an intention in mindfulness is really important. And really the context that we're in makes it even more important, doesn't it? I mean, you have the context of cancer. I have a context of cancer too, not active cancer. And we have all sorts of other factors that probably are touching your families, you know, economic situations, job prospects, and so on. So there's an awful lot going on. And I want now really just to move on to telling you a bit about mindfulness. And telling you a little bit about what it is and what it's not. Because I said to you, there's an awful lot of talk about mindfulness, and a lot of it is Well, some of it's rubbish, actually. Sorry, but it is. Some of it's just rubbish. So hopefully I can make it quite brief, but I can give you a little bit more sense of what mindfulness actually is. I mean, the first thing to say to you about mindfulness is that it's something that you already do. So don't be thinking that this is something that you've got to learn an awful lot about. It's something that I'm sure that all of you already do many times a day. So we're mindful when we're engaged in what we're doing. Yeah, so any of you who paint, any of you who garden, any of you who wash up and just really notice the color of the cutlery and the crockery that you're using, the smell of the bubbles, the smell of the soap, liquid soap that we use. Those of you who enjoy cooking and who are really present as you cook, perhaps present as you chop the vegetables, perhaps, or as you stir the soup or bake the cake. I mean, I think that the arts is a particularly strong association with mindfulness, because I remember a friend of mine was on an art course, and she was painting a picture of the local castle. I used to live in North Wales. And she described to me, and when she came back, she was staying with me that evening, she described to me how she really got completely absorbed in the colours of the grey stone of the castle, and the kind of, you know, the way it was made, and the construction and the shape of it. And it was clear that she said she'd had such a wonderful day. She felt really calm and settled because she'd been so absorbed in her painting of this castle, which actually is quite a dull grey castle. But she was so engaged with it that she was really mindful. And what's interesting is that when we're really mindful, we're very settled, actually. I don't know if any of you can think back to the last time that you were really absorbed in something like gardening. I mean, we can garden with our minds thinking about something else. That's not particularly mindful. But if we garden really being aware of the colours and the soil and the feel of it and the smell of it and the, you know, all of that, and be really absorbed in what we're doing, then we're mindful. And the mind then doesn't have the chance to wander off. Or if it does wander off, because we're quite engaged, it'll come back again. So I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So I think one of the things I'd like to, we've already talked about feet on the floor, which we did when we started the intention practice. Let's also, I want to introduce you to a practice called a pause. Again, this is something that's, you know, very straightforward, very easy to do, often quite hard to remember, but very, very easy to do. So I'm going to guide you in a pause, and let's do this with eyes open. So we don't always, when we're doing a practice, have to close the eyes and sort of go inside. It's important to be able to do it on the hoof, if you like. But the pause is just an opportunity to stop. So whatever you're doing now, just even if it's thinking, or just stopping, pausing, and asking yourself the question of what's going on for me right now. So what's going on for me right now? What's going on for you right now? So let me give you some things that you might be aware of. So you might be aware of sensations in the body. You might be aware of the contact of your seat, of your body with the seat. You might be aware of the touch of your hands, perhaps touching perhaps a desk in front of you or on your lap. What else? You might be aware of the touch of your clothing. So it might be a physical thing that you're aware of. So you might pause and just notice something physical. You might be aware of some pain or some discomfort. Or you might be aware of some thoughts. You know, so you might have a thought that very often our thoughts are sort of commentaries. They're sort of not exactly judgments, but they're often thoughts about I like this, or I don't like that, or I wish this was more or less, or yeah. So often our thoughts sort of pull us towards what we want or what we don't want. But they might be sort of shopping list type thoughts. Oh, I must remember to get some milk tonight before tea. Yeah. And then the other thing that you might also check in on, and I'll make this also quite brief so that it's not too complicated, just check in on mood. So if you were to just pause and ask yourself what's going on for me right now, what would be your mood? Is it flat or is it engaged? Is it bright? Is it sleepy? Is it sluggish? You know, no judgment needed, just noticing mood. So this pause, we've taken a few minutes over it, but this pause can be incredibly brief. So it's just a chance to stop, notice, ask yourself the question, what's going on for me right now? And then just check into the body and thoughts and mood or feelings, emotions. Just be noticing what's going on right now. And I'll talk to you a bit later about why that might be useful. So that's a pause for you. So this is a definition for you so that you've really got a sense of what mindfulness is, but I'm also going to read this out. So mindfulness is the awareness. So mindfulness and awareness, or mindfulness and some senses of attention, are very kind of words that go together. Mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So mindfulness is the awareness that arises. So, you know, when you were feeling your feet on the floor, if you were really there, you were paying attention to a particular focus, your feet on the floor. You can do that now, actually. You can pay attention to your feet on the floor, just the sense of contact between the soles of your feet and the contact that whatever they're touching, the shoes and the floor itself, on purpose. So that's intention. You're intentionally paying attention. It's not just happening because there's a strong smell somewhere or somebody's knocked on the door, but it's actually deliberate. You're paying attention on purpose because you meant to. Yeah. In the present moment, well, it's very hard to pay attention if it's not in the present moment. You know, we can't really pay attention to the sneeze that we had yesterday or the thought that we're going to have tomorrow. But in the present moment has a sort of immediacy to it. So that's quite useful, really. And non-judgmentally, which is almost impossible, actually. You know, you look at that blue and you might think, oh, I like that blue. You look at the pink of target ovarian cancer, or the sort of, I don't know what color it would be, the sort of purpley pink color. You might think, oh, it's a bit bright, or oh, I really like that color. I'd like a blouse in that color or scarf in that color. So non-judgmentally, you know, we're often judgmental. So that's quite difficult to get away from, really. So that's a definition of mindfulness, which I hope might be helpful to you. It's interesting, mindfulness, because on the one hand, I can share it with you over an hour and you can probably seem to get some sense of it, but there are plenty of people who practice being mindful, and they've been practicing for years and years, and there's still they get more to learn. So it's one of those really interesting approaches, really capacities, I think is a better word, that we've all got within us that has a lot to it. So you know, I'm describing it, I'm introducing it to you in a simple way, but obviously if you were to dive into this a lot more, you would find enormous complexity there, as well as some very straightforwardness to it. But I suppose what might be quite helpful is just to focus in on the fact that mindfulness can be about really a one-pointed focus. So let's just practice that a little bit, and it can also be a sort of wider awareness. So just as you're sitting here, I'd like you to look around the room. I'd like to invite you to look around the room and see what you can see without having to move your body. And then choose something that you can see in front of you that you kind of like the look of. Maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a view out the window, or maybe it's an ornament, but something that gives you pleasure when you look at it. So really looking at it in some detail. So perhaps noticing aspects of what you're seeing. Just this, you know, quite a specific thing that you're looking at. Notice aspects of it, perhaps the color, perhaps the shape of the object you're looking at. Perhaps if it moves, or if there's any kind of light, perhaps shining on it or through it. And just as best you can, really looking at the detail of this object, whatever you're looking at. And just noticing what it's like, that there's a lot of detail to see, even if it's a very small object. Probably detail you may have never noticed before. Okay, so now widening your kind of frame of seeing, if you like, and just with the object that you were looking at, just take in the context around the object. So perhaps move your eyes so that you can see what's to the left of it and what's above it, what's to the right of it, and what's beneath it. So we're just going wider, a wider awareness, and you can you can go even wider if you want to your almost the periphery of your vision. So even if you let your gaze just soften, you'll see that you can, even without moving your eyes, you can see quite a long way to the left. And just play with this, and you can see almost up to your eyebrows. Perhaps the ceiling of the room, depends on the tilt of your head. And if you go right, or if you keep your head straight, but if you go to the periphery of your right vision, you can probably see shapes. And then also to the bottom periphery. So you can get an idea of a sort of wider awareness of all that you can see, even with your head still. And then letting go of that. Just letting go of that and coming back to your feet on the floor, if that's okay for you. Just coming back to a sense of contact between your feet and the floor. So letting go of what you were looking at and what you were seeing, and just connecting back into just your feet. Just the weight of your body going down, feet, perhaps in the shoes, perhaps sense of socks. And then a sense of the solid, perhaps of the floor beneath your feet or beneath the shoes. Okay, and then letting that go. And thank you for those of you who wanted to follow that. I hope that was interesting. So I was looking at a favorite picture of mine, which is a picture of a blue heron that a friend sent me. And I was noticing some feathering, some detail of kind of feathers that I've never noticed before, actually. I also noticed that I don't think I'd seen so clearly before, but the heron's feet and bottom legs were in the kind of grayish bit, sort of creamy grey bit, as if it was standing in water. And I also noticed that there's a little signature up in the top corner that I hadn't noticed before. So even though that picture is very familiar to me, very, very familiar, I often look at it. It sort of holds memories and pleasure and friendship there. I actually noticed things in that picture that I'd never seen before. So that was really lovely, actually. I really enjoyed that. And then I widened into the context. And I was surprised how far my peripheral vision went. So I could see a little way into the window to the side here. And I could see quite a long way around, and really just looking at the context, I noticed how wide my awareness can go, actually, if I concentrate, if I pay attention on purpose in the present moment, without judgment, in an open way. So that's a seeing practice for you. And if you were on an 8-week course, a kind of a classical, we'd call this a classical way of learning mindfulness, which is through an 8-week course, once a week for 8 weeks, maybe a couple of hours. You probably have courses nearby you. We'll talk about that a bit later. Then you'd probably have this, you'd be introduced to mindfulness through a raisin exercise, which is a traditional way of doing it, which is a bit weird, but it's also quite good fun. So if you want to do that at home, you just get hold of one raisin, and you have a good look at it, you have a smell of it, and you touch it, and you have a taste of it, and you take a long time over all the detail of that. And you probably notice that there's all sorts in the raisin that you've never noticed before. It's a great one to do with grandchildren or young children, because they're much more immediate than we are. And they just love it, except they want to eat it straight away, you know. But so do we. Yeah. So the point of all that really is how much we miss. You know, how much we miss, because our minds are often spinning out. Our minds are often just engaged in a kind of stream of consciousness that doesn't have a lot of meaning. It doesn't have a lot of purpose or intention. It's called automatic pilot. We drive often on automatic pilot. We cook, we do an awful lot of things on automatic pilot when we're not really aware, we're not really mindful. So in the context of cancer, I mean, all of this is relevant to everybody, but in the context of cancer, let's just look at why is mindfulness so helpful with cancer. There's quite some good research evidence that's actually proven that mindfulness is really quite a helpful thing to bring to an experience of cancer and treatment, and post-treatment as well. And post-treatment is the best time to learn to go on a course. It's not a good idea to go on a course whilst you're having radical treatment. There's just too much going on. But after you've finished treatment, in remission, or when hopefully you're not going to need any further treatment, it's a great time to do mindfulness, great time to do a course, because that's often a time when things can be quite tough. Probably some of you have been through that. But often when you finish treatment, it's then psychologically quite tough. Everybody thinks you're through it all. But actually, very often, the beginning of the impact psychologically is just hitting. So I could say a lot more about that, but let's just leave it there. That you know, don't take on a big length 8-week course whilst you're having treatment. Perhaps if it's low-level treatment, it's okay, but not the sort of radical treatment. So I want to tell you about 3 ways in which I think mindfulness is really helpful to when you're experiencing something like you're experiencing, something like I've experienced. And one of the key ways really is how we can manage difficulty differently. Okay, so let's say that again. So clearly, getting cancer, having treatment, the impact on our families, on ourselves, on our, you know, in many different ways is a huge difficulty. It's a very significant difficulty. So mindfulness isn't going to take that away. It's not going to change. It's not going to change your prognosis. There is actually some background research that's suggesting that mindfulness may well have some positive impact on the immune system, but that's very early days of research. So that's too soon to sort of link it with any kind of physical outcome. But there are many much research evidence that shows that mindfulness is helpful in managing anxiety, and I guess that's the big one for most of us, most people with cancer, is managing anxiety, managing uncertainty, managing what's going to come next, managing what might come next, particularly in the middle of the night or times when we feel quite alone. Managing uncertainty is very tough, and mindfulness gives us a place to come back to, and that's what's important to understand. So when we're managing uncertainty and anxiety, we often spin out into a sort of what's often called an anxious rumination. So I don't know if you've heard that term before, rumination. It's often a sort of where the mind loops into repeating patterns of thoughts. What if? Why did that happen? You know, some sort of connection which may not be true, but feels very true at the moment, in that moment. And what mindfulness offers us is a place to come back to, coming back to feet on the floor, coming back to looking quite carefully at something, coming back to the breath, which I'll teach you in a moment. And it offers us an opportunity for actually holding some of those thoughts that can be quite catastrophic, perhaps for some of you or some of us. So it's a way of managing difficulty differently. We kind of hold the difficulty in the breath or in the anchor of the feet. And the difficult thought might come up again. And we notice it as best we can. Okay, so there you are again. I'm just going to come back for now. I'm just coming back to my feet on the floor, or I'm going to take myself for a walk. So what mindfulness does is it offers us a little gap, if you like, a little gap between the difficult thought or the overwhelm, or sometimes on a good day, you know, but just creating a little gap there that actually, what could I do now that could be really helpful? I'm having a tough day today. You know, I'm having a tough day. What could I do that would be helpful? Yeah, and that's where the pause comes in. We might just ask ourselves that question: what's going on for me right now? Actually, this is quite tough. This is quite tough. It's feeling really uncomfortable. Now, what can I do that would help? Shall I go and do some gardening? Shall I go and turn on a television program I really enjoy and just zog out to that? That could be great. Shall I go and listen to that practice I heard on YouTube or something, and just try that? Just see if I can just steady myself a little bit. Because the great thing is that all of these things change all the time. So even a catastrophic thought, it doesn't stay with us for long. It comes, it impacts, and then it often goes away again. Okay, so managing things differently and having an anchor to come back to help us stabilize. Because the mind spins out, goes into the future, goes back into the past, regretting, spins out, very often isn't in the present. In the present, we can manage things reasonably well. So I've shared with you feet on the floor, which to me is like a first aid practice. First, feet on the floor is the first practice that I always do with anybody that I'm working with, whether it's a teacher, whether it's somebody in training, whether it's somebody with cancer, whether it's somebody who's contacted me via email, whether it's somebody who I'm working with who's actually moving towards the end of their life. Feet on the floor is an absolutely first aid practice. I highly recommend it to you. So you can do it sitting, as we have been. You can do feet on the floor standing. So while you're boiling the kettle or you're stirring the soup or something like that, you can, you're looking at the garden, you can feel feet on the floor, the whole weight of the body being held by those two little feet. Actually, they're quite little compared to the rest of the body. You can also do feet on the floor when you're walking. So maybe you're going for a little walk, and just every now and again you might come back to this footstep. What does that feel? This footstep, the sound, the feel, the footfall. Okay, so feet on the floor sitting, feet on the floor standing, feet on the floor walking. But also you can do body on the bed, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're waking in the middle of the night, you can just come back to a sense of your body lying on the bed with different points of contact that you can feel. Okay, so that's managing difficulty differently, making a little pause, coming back to an anchor. So the other thing that's, I think, tremendously important, and I'm so happy to see that a lot of my colleagues in mindfulness are giving this more attention than that used to be the case. But mindfulness is also brilliant for helping us enjoy life more. That's really important. Nature is a great source of enjoyment. We've got autumn coming, all the colours of autumn, the leaves turning, the berries coming out. I don't know where you guys live, but I'm amazed. I've moved from North Wales, which doesn't have many hedgerows really, all the way down to Oxfordshire, where the hedgerows, you know, we've got little hips and haws and sloes and little orange ones and red ones. I mean, it's so intriguing to see all the different colours in the hedgerows. So poetry is another really, really lovely way of enjoying things. I don't know whether some of you have got some favourite poems, whether any of you got any poetry books. You'll find if you go online that there's loads of poetry online, which I really recommend to you. Somebody called Mary Oliver, who's an American poet. She writes some beautiful poems. They're quite short, a lot to do with nature. And they're really very beautiful. So if you were just to Google Mary Oliver, I think you'd get some poems that some of you might really enjoy. I think finding things that we can enjoy, finding things we can connect with, it might be a face, it might be seeking people out who really lift our spirits. You know, we probably do that naturally, but it's quite useful to just have a gap and think, I'm having a tough day, I've had a tough week. Who can I see that will really lift my spirits? Not necessarily to go through all the story of what's been going on, because often that can pull us down again, can't it? But just to, I don't know, go for a walk together. If that's possible, even if it's online, even if it's on Zoom. So colours I've got here, picture, warm water, you know, having a bath or a shower, the smell of the soap. Treat yourself to some new bubble bath or some really lovely soap. Smell the soap when you've got it. And really bring in the body. I think that's something that I perhaps haven't emphasized enough, but in all that we do in mindfulness, we involve the body. Even though the body with people with cancer, you know, the body's let us down, but actually there's a lot of the body that works very well still. Even you know, even in the middle of treatment, there's still a lot that's the smell and there's looking and the tasting and so on. Tasting maybe not so much, but sometimes. But you know, bring in the body, because the body, we can only experience the body in the present moment. thoughts and feelings can take us all over the place, but it's only the body that's actually in this present moment. So those are the two things that I think that mindfulness really helps a lot with, actually. So managing difficulty differently, managing it more kindly, with more awareness, with more choice as to how to actually hold things. And also learning to remember to enjoy things and really connecting with what we enjoy, with what brings us pleasure. Because we miss so much, don't we? You know, we might miss a whole life cycle of a rose. I've got a beautiful rose in the garden at the moment. When it first comes out, it's quite yellowish in the middle, like the little pinky bits. And then as it comes out more, it fades, but the sort of pink edges to the petals. It's ever so easy for me just to notice the beginning of it and then to notice it's died. And that means I've probably missed 2 or 3 days in between where the rose is changing and you know, the smell is coming out and the softness of the petals and so on. Because there's so much for us to enjoy, there's so much for us to notice that we miss. Yeah. So the third thing I wanted to mention to you also that I think mindfulness is tremendously important for is kindness. You know, so mindfulness has a lot of qualities. When we're mindful, we're open, we're aware, as we've been talking about with the different definitions of mindfulness. But we're also, with mindfulness, we learn to be kind. We can't really be mindful without having a sort of a softening, a sort of an okayness to things. To be mindful and judgmental together is almost contradictory. And that doesn't mean that everything's wonderful, because everything isn't wonderful at all. But I think we can cultivate this, a bit like saying to you that mindfulness is a pre-existing capacity that you've already got. We've all got this absolutely innate capacity to be mindful. We don't have to go on courses. We've already got it. We can already cultivate it for ourselves. But going on a course is a great way to really up this, to really turn up the volume of mindfulness in your life. But we've also got kindness. You know, we've also intuitively got this capacity for kindness, which again we can cultivate. And in our society, in a sort of Western society, we're not great at kindness. We're ever so good at blame and judgment. You know, we're ever so good at splitting off and making it somebody else's fault. But those people, those friends of ours who we know who are really kind, they're very, very precious, I think. So having that sense that really whatever you're going through just right now, whatever I'm going through right now, is individual to me, but it's also shared with all of humanity in some ways. And offering some kindness to perhaps others who have a cancer similar to yours, a stage similar to yours, a stage of treatment similar to yours. But if you want to, you know, perhaps just with your feet on the floor and taking a breath, just wishing them well and hoping that they're wishing you well, just as we are on this screen with everybody involved. So let's do that a little bit. So I wanted to read you this poem. So this is one of the poems I think is very beautiful, and it's called The Peace of Wild Things. So it very much speaks to that connecting with things that are beautiful. So one way of listening to a poem was with your eyes closed and just letting my words, I'm going to read it to you, and letting my words just come in if you'd like to, or reading it with me. The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and am free. It's a beautiful poem. And I think, again, you know, you'll get the slides, but if you want to just Google The Peace of Wild Things, then this poem will come up. The Peace of Wild Things. And it's so true, isn't it? I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I think it's something that we do a lot of. I think it's something that all people do, but I think people with cancer inevitably do, forethought of grief. And at the end, but I come into the presence of still water. That's beautiful, isn't it? And I rest in the grace of the world and I'm free. So I wanted to share with you these everyday practices that you can take away. So the pause we've done is pause of just like, what's going on for me right now? Just checking into the body and the mind. How am I? Just asking yourself a question. How am I right now? Feet on the floor, which we've done a fair bit of, which I massively recommend to you. It gives you an anchor to come back to. It gives you a place of holding, if you like. A place of stability. Just coming back to a contact between your feet and the floor. Just very, very simple. Just placing attention in the sensations of contact. And now I want to teach you coming to the breath, which again is incredibly simple. So again, with your eyes open, your eyes closed, just inviting you to notice your feet on the floor. Feel the weight of the body going down. And then simply coming to notice the breath, breathing in the body. So you might just be noticing the rise of the breath as it comes in, and the fall of the breath as it goes out. There isn't any particular way to breathe. You don't have to deepen the breath or make it faster or slower. You can just breathe as you breathe. All you need to do is just almost like place your attention into the sensations of the breath breathing. And if this doesn't suit you, then coming back to your feet on the floor, because the breath isn't helpful for everybody, but for some people, it can be quite helpful. It's sort of a moving focus, a dynamic focus with lots of detail. So perhaps just connecting with the very beginnings of the next in-breath. Just that moment that the breath lifts to come in. Noticing how it turns around and then goes out. And then I'm going to include the last practice, just to add it on to what we're already doing. So coming to the breath with kindness. So it's almost as if, as you breathe in, kindness comes in on the breath. Just this possibility of a kind of well-wishing to ourselves. Perhaps a slight softening. Just a kind of possibility of good wishes almost flowing in on the breath. Like a kind intention for ourselves, for the body, perhaps moving to some part of the body that could use a little bit of kindness. And perhaps into the mind, into some mood that's been lingering for a bit. A little bit of kindness, just moving in there, just good wishes. Not to imagine we have to feel something any different or we have to feel tremendously kind, but just doing this to cultivate this possibility of kindness for ourselves, for yourself, as you breathe, as your feet are on the floor. And then when you're ready, just opening your eyes again. And just to say to you that you can actually put some of these practices together to make a slightly longer practice if you'd like to. So you can start with a pause, what's going on for me right now. And you can include the feet on the floor, which I've been massively recommending. Then you can just come to a breath or two. Doesn't need to take long. So these ideas that when you're walking or you're perhaps breathing, you might just wish yourself. You might just say to yourself, I'm wishing myself safety. Wish for myself to be safe. And let's do this also for everybody on this Facebook or on this Zoom call. We're wishing you all safety. So we're wishing us all well-being. Wishing us all contentment as much as possible. Wishing us all some sense of calm and steadiness. And perhaps adding whatever you'd like to add. I just wanted to show you one of the resources that might be helpful if you'd like, and that's this book that I've written particularly for people with cancer. So I've written 2 books, one for teachers, but this one is for people with cancer themselves, and it's based around some of the approaches that I've been sharing with you. And on the website, you can actually get some practices with this book. So you can look up on the website and get the practices on your phone if you'd like to. So it's called Mindfulness: A Kindly Approach to Being with Cancer. And it's been, people tell me it's been quite helpful. So I hope if you're interested in that, you can look at that. And hopefully you could get it out of your library. That would be fantastic if you could. So it's time to finish, and you know, I hope very much that this session has been helpful and that you've got some ideas as to how to just interrupt the sort of spinning of the mind, which my mind does. I'm sure your mind does. I think most minds do. So I wish you well. I really do wish you well. And it's been great that you've joined. I'm so glad. I hope it's been helpful.